I'm not the kind of guy who starts drama at work. I don't yell, I don't throw tantrums, and I've never once stormed out of a meeting. I'm the guy who keeps his head down, does his job, and lets my results speak for themselves. That's probably why it hit so hard when I found out my own team had used my name to pitch a $180,000 client deal without telling me a damn thing about it. It started like any other Thursday morning. Coffee in one hand, laptop bag over my shoulder, scrolling through the usual avalanche of emails. Then I saw it. A message from one of our top clients. Subject line: follow up on the financial proposal you presented. I frowned. Presented? I hadn't presented anything. We didn't even have a pitch scheduled that week. Still, I opened it. The client, a tech company out of Austin, thanked me for the excellent presentation yesterday and asked for clarification on several budget figures. They even mentioned the custom pricing model I had developed. My chest went cold. I had never built that model. I knew exactly who had. 3 weeks earlier, my coworkers, Liam and Rachel, had been pushing for a new client account. A big one. It was a make-or-break deal for the quarter, and they were desperate to prove themselves. I'd helped them draft a few outlines, shared some of my old templates, and warned them that the client would expect detailed analytics, not just fancy slides. Apparently, they took that as an invitation to take everything I'd built over the last 2 years and put my name on it. When I confronted Liam, he didn't even look guilty. He leaned back in his chair and said, "Come on, Ethan. You're our analytics guy. The client trusts your name. We just needed credibility." Credibility. That word snapped something inside me. They hadn't earned credibility. They'd stolen it. And worse, they'd done it behind my back. Rachel chimed in before I could respond. "We were going to tell you after," she said, like that somehow made it better. "It's just that you've got the best relationship with that client, and well, we figured if your name was on the deck, it would close faster." "So you impersonated me?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. "You used my credentials, my templates, and my signature block, and you didn't think to mention it?" Liam shrugged. "It worked, didn't it?" That line, "It worked, didn't it?" burned itself into my skull. Later that day, the department manager called a meeting. He wanted to congratulate the team on landing the preliminary interest from the client. Liam took credit for leading the presentation. Rachel praised the data model I'd developed, and the manager nodded like a proud dad. I sat there silent, watching them bask in the light they'd stolen. The pitch was supposedly successful, the client ready to move forward pending a few revisions. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt sick. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because here's the thing about people like Liam and Rachel. They don't think ahead. They treat trust like a disposable tool, something to borrow for convenience and toss aside when it's no longer useful. I wanted to see what would happen when the real work started. And sure enough, a week later, it did. The client requested a detailed projection analysis, something only I knew how to build. My system wasn't just formulas. It was months of refinement, layers of automation, checks and balances that could predict outcome ranges down to the decimal. The kind of thing that took me years to perfect. And now, they wanted it. From me. I watched Liam and Rachel scramble. They tried to reverse engineer my spreadsheets, guessing at variables, tweaking inputs, emailing me vague clarification questions under the pretense of updating our shared models. They didn't dare admit what they'd done, but the client wasn't stupid. Their next email CC'd me directly. "Ethan, we really appreciated your explanation yesterday about the long-term ROI calculation. Could you clarify the assumptions behind the margin sensitivity table?" I stared at the message, realizing what it meant. They'd faked not only my name, but my words. They had literally pretended to be me on the call. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every meeting, every late night I'd stayed in the office perfecting those models, every time I'd covered for Liam's mistakes, or helped Rachel polish her slides. And now they'd dragged my name into a 6-figure deal built on lies. If this client found out, it wouldn't be their reputations on the line, it would be mine. By Monday, the fallout had already started. The client sent a list of inconsistencies they'd noticed in the proposal. Numbers didn't match, metrics contradicted each other, forecasts were off. Our manager forwarded it to the team with a curt message. Ethan, please review your data. This doesn't reflect your usual standard. My data. My standard. Liam had the nerve to glance at me across the room and whisper, "We'll fix it, man. Just send us the right formulas." I didn't answer. I just nodded slowly. Because in that moment, I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I wasn't going to stop it. I let them handle the revisions. I watched as they guessed, recalculated, rephrased. They were in over their heads, but too proud to admit it. Every day I saw them dig deeper into the hole they'd made, trying to hold together a lie that was built on my reputation. And the best part? I didn't need to expose them. They were doing it to themselves. The deal was scheduled to close on Friday. The final pitch. The presentation that would decide everything. Liam and Rachel were confident, arrogantly so. "We've got this," Rachel said in the hallway that morning, brushing imaginary dust from her blazer. "They love you." Us. Yeah, they loved me. I sat quietly through the presentation. They used my deck, my talking points, my strategies, all butchered beyond recognition. I could almost hear the client's patience thinning through the speakerphone. By the end, the only thing left was awkward silence. The client thanked them for their time and promised to reconsider next quarter. That's corporate speak, for you'll never hear from us again. When the call ended, nobody said a word. Liam stared at his laptop. Rachel fiddled with her pen. The manager rubbed his temples. Then he looked up, right at me. "Ethan," he said slowly, "how could this happen under your name?" And there it was, the moment they'd been waiting for, their escape route. All eyes turned toward me, the guy whose name had been used, the one they thought would take the fall. But instead of panicking, I smiled, just slightly, because I already knew something they didn't. This wasn't my downfall. It was the beginning of theirs. When the conference room emptied, nobody spoke to me. People passed by, silent, eyes flicking away like I was contagious. The kind of silence that isn't calm. It's defensive. Everyone knew something ugly had just happened, and nobody wanted to stand close enough to get splattered. I stayed behind after the meeting, staring at the whiteboard still covered in half-erased numbers. The air smelled like burnt coffee and failure. Liam and Rachel whispered near the door, too cowardly to come close. "Ethan," my manager Colin finally said, adjusting his glasses, "we need to talk." Of course we did. He shut the door. "This pitch, the numbers, the assumptions, they don't align with your previous models. The client's feedback was brutal. They said you couldn't defend your data." I just looked at him. I could see the doubt in his eyes, the quiet accusation already forming. "Colin," I said calmly, "do you seriously believe I made that presentation?" He hesitated. "It had your name on it. The proposal, the deck, even the follow-up emails." "Yeah," I said, "it did. And you never once asked me if I wrote them." That's when his expression shifted. That sharp flicker of realization that maybe he'd missed something obvious. But he didn't apologize. Managers never do. Instead, he said, "Well, if your teammates used your work without authorization, that's an internal issue. For now, the client's unhappy, and we have to address that first." Of course, the company always cared more about optics than truth. That afternoon, a storm brewed behind closed doors. Colin called an emergency debrief. Everyone pretended to be calm, sipping water and scrolling their phones while the tension climbed like a wire about to snap. Liam started with his usual confidence. "We had a solid pitch structure. The data inconsistencies were minimal." "Minimal?" Colin snapped. "They called it incoherent. They said whoever presented had no grasp of the market model." Rachel spoke up, voice shaking. "We can fix it. We just need Ethan to..." "To what?" I cut in. "Clean up after you?" Every head turned. The words hit harder than I expected. Even my own voice sounded colder than usual. Liam forced a laugh. Dude, relax. We were all part of the same team. You act like we did something behind your back. I leaned forward. You used my credentials. You wrote emails as me. You pitched a 180K deal under my name. That's not teamwork. That's fraud. The room froze. Colin blinked like he couldn't process the word fraud. It was too heavy, too real. Let's all take a breath, he said finally. Palms up like a mediator. No accusations. Let's focus on solutions. But the thing about corporate damage is that once the cracks appear, everyone starts fighting for the best spot on the lifeboat. I could see it already. Liam trying to look composed, Rachel scribbling in her notebook like documenting her version of events would save her. By the end of the day, an official performance review notice hit my inbox. Not theirs. Mine. The email accused me of data mismanagement and failure to maintain client communication integrity. It was absurd, but also predictable. When things go wrong, the easiest target is the one whose name is already on the paperwork. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I printed everything. Every document, every email, every timestamp showing I hadn't accessed that project file once since the date of the so-called presentation. I saved copies to an external drive. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew silence was my sharpest weapon. That weekend, I went home to my small apartment, made a drink, and sat in the dark with my laptop open. I rewatched the recorded client call. I'd requested a copy earlier, pretending I needed to review for feedback, and there it was. Rachel's voice pretending to be mine, reading my notes word for word. Except she didn't understand half of what she was saying. Liam interrupted constantly, covering mistakes with corporate jargon. The client's body language shifted from polite interest to visible discomfort. And then came the moment that sealed their fate. Rachel said, as Ethan developed in his 2023 analysis, followed by numbers that didn't exist in any of my files, the timestamp, the tone, the fake authority. It was all there, on record. When Monday came, the consequences began their slow, inevitable crawl. The client officially terminated the deal. Their email was short and surgical. We've decided to pursue other partnerships due to concerns about internal misrepresentation. That word, misrepresentation, hit like a bullet. Colin called another meeting. He was pale, sweating. This is serious, he said, voice trembling slightly. If they escalate this, it could become a compliance issue. We need full transparency from everyone involved. Liam shot me a glare. You're not seriously blaming us for this, are you? Colin didn't answer. He didn't have to. By Tuesday, HR got involved. They requested everyone's emails and chat logs for the past 2 months. Rachel cried in the hallway. Liam argued with IT about access permissions. I kept quiet and let the machine turn. On Wednesday, Colin asked to see me privately again. He looked different this time. Tired. Wary. Ethan, he said slowly, you're cleared. The logs confirm you didn't participate in the pitch. Your account wasn't even used from your device. I said nothing. I just nodded. He swallowed. But we have another problem. The client reached out to our executive team. They're demanding an explanation, and they mentioned your name specifically. They said you were the only one they trusted to give them a straight answer. It was poetic in a way. The same name my coworkers had stolen was now the only one the client still respected. Do you want me to call them? I asked. He hesitated, then nodded. Please. That call was the quietest form of revenge I've ever experienced. The client's tone softened the moment I introduced myself. I didn't blame anyone. I didn't make excuses. I simply apologized for the confusion, clarified that there had been an internal misunderstanding, and assured them I valued their time. They thanked me, sincerely. By the end of the call, they even hinted at keeping me in mind for future projects. When I hung up, Colin exhaled. That was perfect, he said, almost relieved. But the relief wasn't for me. It was for him, for the company, for the illusion of control they thought they'd regained. What they didn't know was that I'd already made up my mind. I was done here. I didn't care about saving anyone's face or reputation. The next move wouldn't be loud, it would be precise. By Friday, HR sent out an internal notice. Liam and Rachel were suspended pending investigation. The rumor mill exploded. People whispered in break rooms, exchanged glances in elevators. The same colleagues who'd ignored me now stopped by my desk just to say, "Hey man, tough week, huh?" "Yeah, tough week." I smiled politely, said little, and went back to work. Because this wasn't the end yet. No, this was only the beginning of the reckoning. And the beauty of it was, I wouldn't have to lift a single finger to make it happen. The Monday after their suspension, the office felt hollow. You know that strange quiet that hits right before a storm breaks? That was it. Desks that used to hum with chatter now sat empty. Slack channels went silent. Everyone pretended to work while secretly waiting for the next headline in the unfolding corporate drama. And me? I just kept smiling, calm, invisible, patient. Because by then, I'd already realized something. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth to walk itself out the front door. HR had requested access to the company's shared drive, and when they got it, they discovered more than anyone expected. I knew because one of the compliance analysts, an old friend from a previous project, called me one evening after hours. "Ethan," she said in a low voice, "you might want to sit down." Apparently, Liam and Rachel had copied entire sections of my proprietary models. Not just data, but code. They'd repackaged my original algorithms with minor edits and claimed them as their own. Even worse, they'd sent them externally without encryption, exposing client-sensitive data. It wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. I remember sitting there in my small apartment, laptop open, cursor blinking over an email draft addressed to HR. I could have easily attached every file I had, every chat log that proved I'd been kept in the dark. I could have written a righteous message about betrayal, credit theft, and corporate politics. But I didn't. Instead, I typed one line. If you need clarification on how those models were originally built, I'd be happy to walk you through the process. That was all. Professional, polite, unshakable. By Tuesday morning, I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room with the HR director, the compliance officer, and Colin. They looked exhausted. Papers everywhere, screens filled with audit logs. "Ethan," the HR director said, folding her hands, "we appreciate your cooperation during this process. It's clear that none of the data used in the 180K proposal originated from your authorized files. In fact," she glanced at Colin, "we found your last contribution to the shared drive was over a month before the pitch. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. "That's correct." Colin exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples. He looked 10 years older than he had 2 weeks ago. The compliance officer spoke next. "Liam and Rachel modified your data without permission. They falsified project ownership and misrepresented internal authorship to the client. That's not just a policy breach. That's corporate fraud." Silence. Colin tried to defend them. "They're young, ambitious, made a poor decision. That cost us a 6-figure deal and almost a lawsuit." HR interrupted sharply. The meeting ended with the kind of phrase that makes your pulse quicken even when you're innocent. "We'll be in touch." But I wasn't worried. I walked out of that glass box with the same quiet confidence that had started building since the moment my name appeared on that stolen pitch, because I'd seen the dominoes fall before they did. And I'd learned that sometimes you don't need to push. You just need to stop holding them up. That afternoon, the client called again. This time, it wasn't their manager. It was the CFO himself. "Ethan," he said, his tone warmer than I expected, "I wanted to thank you for the professionalism you showed during that situation." "No need to thank me," I said carefully. "It was unfortunate." "Unfortunate," he repeated, almost laughing. "That's a diplomatic way to put it. Listen, our board reviewed the events, and it's clear you weren't at fault. If anything, your transparency during the follow-up impressed them. Would you consider meeting to discuss potential future collaboration? Perhaps directly with us? I paused. My mind was already moving 10 steps ahead. Of course, I said. I'd be happy to. The next day I took the meeting, not as a representative of my company, but as myself. They wanted an independent consultant, someone they could trust, someone who understood the value of honesty. By the end of the call, they offered me a short-term contract. Nothing massive, just a pilot, but at my personal consulting rate, it was worth more per hour than my entire paycheck. When I got off the call, I sat there in stunned silence. Then I laughed, because karma hadn't just come around. It had shown up early, punctual, and carrying a briefcase. Meanwhile, in the office, the fallout deepened. HR released an internal statement about data integrity violations. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. The rumor mill filled in the blanks. Liam had been terminated effective immediately. Rachel was on final review, pending legal evaluation. Colin avoided eye contact whenever we crossed paths. I think he realized too late that the only person who'd been holding his department together was the one he almost blamed. But I didn't rub it in. I didn't gloat. I just worked. Quietly, efficiently, until Friday afternoon. That's when Colin called me into his office one last time. He cleared his throat, not meeting my eyes. Ethan, the executive board is impressed with how you handled yourself during this entire ordeal. They'd like to offer you a promotion, senior project lead. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But instead, I just felt done. Thank you, I said, but I think I'll pass. He blinked. Excuse me? I smiled. I've already accepted another offer. The look on his face was priceless. Confusion, disbelief, and just a hint of regret. You're leaving? Yeah, I said. Sometimes it's better to plant new seeds than try to revive a burned field. He didn't get it. He never would. By the end of the week, I was officially out. Cleared my desk, said polite goodbyes, walked out without a backward glance, and that's when the best part happened. On my way out, I passed the HR office, the same one where they'd interrogated me weeks earlier. The compliance officer was there, talking to someone on a video call. As I walked by, I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. Client Transition. Independent Consultant. Ethan Ward. They were transferring the remaining $180K project to me. Personally, I didn't steal their deal. They handed it to me, and I knew, without lifting a finger, without revenge, without a single raised voice, that the people who tried to take credit for my work had ended up handing me their careers on a silver platter. I stepped outside into the cool evening air. For the first time in months, I felt light, because the truth had done the work for me, and I was finally free. 3 months later, I walked into a glass office overlooking downtown, not as an employee, but as a partner. My consulting work for the client from the 180K pitch had turned into something much bigger. They'd seen how I operated, how I handled pressure without drama, and how I treated every project like a living thing that deserved care. They offered me a permanent contract, a title, my own small team. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was evolution. Still, the echoes of what happened at my old company, Grayson and Holt Consulting, followed me like a rumor that refused to die. I didn't seek updates, but the corporate world is small. News finds you whether you want it or not. The first whisper came from a former coworker. Hey, Ethan, did you hear? Colin resigned. Apparently, after Liam and Rachel's termination, the company tried to rebuild their client trust. But the damage was irreversible. The client I'd saved was just one of several accounts that walked away after losing confidence in Grayson and Holt's ethics. The internal review found deeper issues too: fabricated metrics, recycled proposals, inflated performance reports. Liam and Rachel hadn't just faked my name. They'd been doing it to others. And Colin? He'd look the other way until it was too late. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I didn't even smile when I heard he'd left under mutual agreement. Because the truth is, watching people destroy themselves isn't satisfying when you've already outgrown the battlefield. But fate wasn't done yet. One afternoon, while reviewing new proposals at my firm, I got an unexpected email. Subject: Partnership Inquiry, Grayson and Holt. I froze. The message was from their new acting director, a woman named Nora. She wrote, "Ethan, I'm reaching out regarding a potential subcontracting opportunity. We're in the process of restructuring our analytics division and would like to explore collaboration on several projects previously managed by your department." My department. I reread that line twice. The irony hit me like a slow, perfect wave. The same company that had once let my name be dragged through the mud was now asking me for help rebuilding their credibility. For a few minutes, I just stared at the email, not out of spite, out of awe. Because karma doesn't always come crashing down like a thunderstorm. Sometimes it arrives as a polite email in your inbox, signed, "Warm regards." I didn't reply right away. I thought about it over the weekend, about how easy it would be to decline with a cutting remark or to forward the email to every coworker who'd once ignored me. But that wasn't who I was anymore. So on Monday morning, I wrote back, "Hi, Nora. Thank you for reaching out. I'd be open to discussing potential collaboration, provided we can ensure transparent communication and ethical project management from both sides. Best, Ethan Ward. Professional, simple, no ego, just boundaries." 2 weeks later, we met in person. The same conference room layout, the same city skyline view, but this time the dynamic was reversed. They needed me. Nora was polite, nervous even. She explained that the firm had lost several major clients after the internal scandal. "We're rebuilding from the ground up," she said, "and your name carries weight in the industry. People still talk about how you handled that situation." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "I'm glad they remember professionalism, not drama." She smiled weakly. "That's exactly what we need." We ended up signing a short-term consulting agreement. My firm would help them design a new client retention model. Ironically, the very system Liam and Rachel once stole from me. It was surreal to sit at their conference table, leading a presentation on the same principles I'd been mocked for. At one point during the meeting, I caught sight of the wall, where the old "Employee of the Quarter" plaques used to hang. The one that had once held Liam's name was gone. So was Rachel's. So was mine. The wall was bare, a clean slate. When the presentation ended, Nora shook my hand and said, "It's strange how things come full circle, isn't it?" I smiled. "No, not strange, just fair." After that, I walked out of Grayson and Holt for the last time. Not as a victim, not as an underdog, but as a man who'd learned that silence and patience are sharper than any revenge plot. Because the truth is, the best revenge doesn't need noise. It doesn't need spectacle. It just needs time and consequence. Liam's LinkedIn showed consultant, freelance, corporate code for unemployed. Rachel's profile had disappeared entirely. Colin, last I heard, was teaching leadership and ethics in business at a community college. I couldn't make that up if I tried. And me? I was running projects worth 10 times the one they'd stolen. The client who once doubted me had become a long-term partner. Every success I had from that moment forward carried a quiet satisfaction. Not because I'd beaten anyone, but because I'd survived them. Sometimes the best justice isn't fire or fury. It's growth. It's walking away with your dignity intact, while the people who wronged you drown in their own reflection. So when people ask me now, "How did you get your big break?" I tell them the truth. It started the day my coworkers used my name without asking, because that was the day I realized something I'll never forget. When people steal your light, let them. The fire always burns brighter when they're the ones standing too close to it, and eventually they'll see what you already knew. You were never the problem. You were the standard.